You ever feel like you're a ghost in your own house? Not the kind that haunts people, the kind that's being haunted. I was sitting at our mahogany dining table. The wood was cold. It always felt cold. Across from me, Julian was staring at his phone, his thumb hovering over the screen, his face lit by that pale blue light. He wasn't looking at emails. He wasn't looking at stocks. I knew that look. It was the look of a man who was miles away, wandering through a memory I wasn't invited to. Julian said. My voice sounded small, even to me. He didn't blink. Julian, the anniversary dinner is at 7. I made reservations at that place you like. The one with the view of the harbor. Finally he looked up. But he didn't see me. He saw the shape of a woman, sure. He saw the silk dress I'd bought specifically because it was his favorite color, emerald green. But his eyes, they were searching for a different shade of green, a different face. Right, he muttered, his voice flat. The anniversary. 3 years. Time flies. 3 years. For him, it was a milestone of a business arrangement. For me, it was 3 years of trying to fit into a mold that was already broken. You see, everyone in this city knows Julian Vance. The titan of tech. The man with the Midas touch. But they don't know about the locket he keeps in his top desk drawer. They don't know about the way he flinches when he hears the name, Elena. And they definitely don't know that I only got this ring on my finger because I have the same high cheekbones and the same damn laugh as a girl who disappeared from his life 10 years ago. I reached across the table, my hand trembling slightly, and touched his wrist. He pulled away. It wasn't a jerk, it was a slow, deliberate retreat. Like I was made of something that burned. I have a late meeting, Maya, he said, standing up. He didn't look at the dinner I'd spent 3 hours preparing. He didn't look at the candles I'd lit. Don't wait up. Is it a meeting, Julian? Or are you going to the gallery again? He froze. The air in the room turned to ice. The gallery. The place where Elena's father exhibited his work. The place where Julian went to breathe in the scent of a life he lost. He turned back, his jaw tight. Don't do this. Not tonight. Don't do what? Don't exist. Don't notice that I'm a placeholder. The words were out before I could stop them. My heart was thudding against my ribs like a trapped bird. I've spent 3 years being a substitute, Julian. I've changed my hair. I've changed my style. I even started drinking that bitter black coffee you like just because she did. When do I get to be Maya? He walked over to me, leaning down until his face was inches from mine. For a second I thought he might actually see me. Really see me. But his eyes were like flint. You knew the deal, Maya, he whispered. His breath smelling of expensive bourbon and shadows. You wanted the security. You wanted the Vance name. I wanted a wife who wouldn't complicate my life. Don't rewrite the contract now. He left. The front door clicked shut. Not a slam, just a quiet, final click. I sat there in the dark. The candles flickered out, one by one, leaving behind nothing but the smell of burnt wax and the sound of my own shallow breathing. I looked down at my hands. I was wearing her favorite perfume. Felt sick. I stood up and walked to his study. I shouldn't have. I'd promised myself I'd never be that woman. But the pain was a physical weight now, pressing into my lungs. I opened the top drawer of his desk. There it was. An old worn photograph. A girl with messy hair laughing in the rain. She looked nothing like the polished, silent version of me I'd become. She looked alive. But as I moved the photo, something else fell out. A legal envelope. It was addressed to a private investigator. My breath hitched. I opened it, my fingers fumbling with the seal. Inside wasn't just information about Elena. There were photos. Recent photos. Photos of her in a small town 3 states away. And then I saw the date on the letter from the investigator. It was dated yesterday. The headline on the internal memo clipped to the photos read, "Subject found. Transition plan initiated." My heart stopped. Transition plan. I wasn't just a substitute anymore. I was an obstacle. Suddenly the security system chirped. The front door was opening again. Julian was back. But he wasn't alone. I heard a woman's voice. A voice that sounded hauntingly, terrifyingly like my own, yet different. "It's beautiful, Julian," the voice whispered. "But what about your wife?" I held my breath, the legal papers crinkling in my hand, as Julian's reply echoed down the hallway. "Don't worry about Maya," he said, his voice colder than I'd ever heard it. "She's already served her purpose." I pressed my back against the cold mahogany of Julian's desk, the papers crinkling like dry leaves in my hand. My chest felt like it was being crushed. Served her purpose. Those words didn't just hurt, they erased me. Through the crack in the study door I saw them. Julian was standing in the foyer, his hand resting on the small of a woman's back. It wasn't me. It was her. Elara. The girl from the photos, the girl from 10 years ago, only older, more refined. She was looking at my husband with a proprietary gaze that made my skin crawl. "The house is exactly how I remembered you describing it," she murmured. Her voice. It was a haunting mirror image of mine, but without the fatigue. "It's yours, Elara," Julian said. "Not ours. Ours. I just need a few days to finalize the transition. There's some paperwork regarding the exit clause." Exit clause. I felt a cold sweat break out. I knew our prenup, or I thought I did. I looked down at the documents in my hand, squinting in the dim light. My eyes landed on a highlighted paragraph. Clause 14b. Moral turpitude and behavioral breach. If Julian could prove I was unstable, the multimillion-dollar settlement I was promised would vanish. He wasn't just bringing his first love home. He was preparing to frame me to save his bottom line. "Wait here," Julian said to her. "I need to check if Maya left the lights on. She's been forgetful lately. Distracted." The floorboards groaned. He was coming toward the study. I scrambled, shoving the papers back and sliding under the massive oak desk just as the door handle turned. I held my breath until my lungs burned. From the floor, I could see his expensive leather shoes. He stopped at the desk. A long, terrifying pause. "Maya," he called out, his voice smooth as silk and twice as deadly. He closed the drawer, but not all the way. He left it cracked. Trap. He wanted to see if I'd bite. As he walked out, I realized I wasn't a wife. I was a lease that was about to expire. And Julian Vance didn't renew leases. He evicted them. I waited until the house went silent before crawling out from under that desk. I didn't cry. The time for crying ended when I realized I was being hunted in my own home. I grabbed my phone and snapped photos of every single page in that drawer. The private investigator's reports, the bank transfers to Elara's secret account, and the draft of the incident report. A fake narrative about my mental breakdown. But as I scrolled, I saw something that made my blood turn to ice. A wire transfer for $500,000 to a shell company called Apex Holdings. The memo read, "Relocation and silence." He wasn't just bringing her back. He was buying her. And he was using the money from the trust fund my father had helped him secure to do it. The betrayal tasted like copper. I looked at the emerald green dress I was wearing. The substitute dress. I reached behind my back, unzipped it, and let it fall to the floor. I didn't pack a bag. That would look like I was leaving. I needed to look like I was unraveling. I walked into our master bedroom, sat in front of the vanity, and picked up a pair of scissors. I looked at the long blonde hair Julian had always insisted I keep because it reminded him of her. Snip. Clump of hair fell. By the time the sun started to peek through the curtains, I didn't look like Elara anymore. I looked like a stranger. The door opened. Julian walked in, a fake look of concern on his face. "Maya, where have you?" He stopped. His eyes went to the hair on the floor, then to my jagged, chin-length cut. "I couldn't sleep," I said, giving him a wide, glassy-eyed smile. "I felt like someone else was living in my skin, Julian. So I cut her out. Isn't it wonderful?" The look of pure horror on his face told me everything. He thought I was losing my mind. He didn't realize I was finally finding it. But then he smiled back, a small, cruel tilt of the lips. He reached for his phone and typed a quick message. I saw the recipient's name, Dr. Eris. He wasn't horrified. He was happy. I'd just given him exactly what he needed for Clause 14b. For the next 2 days, Julian treated me like glass he was waiting to shatter. He'd brought Elara into the guest wing openly now, telling the staff she was a specialist here to help with my recovery. Every meal was a performance. I'd stare at my plate, whispering to myself, while they exchanged looks of triumph over their wine glasses. But every night I slipped out the back. I headed to the one place Julian would never look, the office of Weston Blake. Weston was Julian's former partner, the man Julian had stepped on to build his empire. He looked at the photos on my phone, his expression shifting from boredom to a slow, predatory grin. This is sloppy, even for Julian, Weston said. He's so blinded by this first love fantasy that he's leaving a paper trail a mile wide. But Maya, you're playing a dangerous game. If Dr. Eris shows up with those commitment papers, you won't be able to leave. I know, I whispered. But I need the login to the Apex Holdings portal. That $500K he sent Elara. It wasn't a gift, was it? Weston laughed. No. It was a payoff for the encrypted keys she stole from me 10 years ago. She didn't leave Julian because she was lost. She left because she was a corporate spy. And now she's back to help him finish the job on the new IPO. The room spun. It wasn't just a romance. It was a long con. And I was the only person standing in the way of a multi-billion-dollar fraud. I can get you in, Weston said, sliding a flash drive across the table. But you have to go back. You have to let them think they've won. Can you handle one more night in that house? Took the drive. I've spent 3 years being a ghost, Weston. I can handle one more night. When I got home, the house was dark except for the library. I crept toward the door and heard Elara's voice. He's suspicious, Julian. The auditor asked about the missing capital. Don't worry, Julian replied. By tomorrow morning, Maya will be in the facility, and her instability will be the perfect cover for the accounting errors. Dead men tell no tales, and crazy wives don't win court cases. Clutched the flash drive. They weren't just taking my money. They were planning to disappear me. Friday morning. The air in the mansion felt heavy, like the atmosphere before a massive storm. Julian called me into the study at 9 a.m. Dr. Eris was there, sitting in a leather chair with a briefcase on his lap. He looked at me with that professional, pitying look that made me want to scream. Maya, honey, Julian said, his voice dripping with fake empathy. We talked about this. You're not well. Dr. Eris thinks a few weeks at the retreat will help you find yourself again. He pushed a stack of papers toward me. At the very top was the voluntary commitment order. If I signed it, I was giving up my legal rights to my finances, my voice, and my freedom. I just want to be happy again, Julian, I said, my voice trembling perfectly. Picked up the pen. Elara stood by the window, watching like a vulture waiting for a meal. I could see the excitement in her eyes. The moment that pen touched the paper, she became the new Mrs. Vance. I leaned over the desk, the pen hovering over the signature line. Julian was leaning in, his breath hitching with anticipation. Oh, wait, I said, stopping suddenly. I almost forgot. I have a gift for you first, Julian. For our anniversary. I pulled my phone out and placed it on the desk. What is this? Julian snapped, his patience finally breaking. It's a live stream, I said, my voice turning cold and clear. To the board of directors. They're currently watching a real-time feed of the Apex Holdings offshore account being drained into the Vance Tech Employee Pension Fund. And they're listening to this conversation. Julian's face went gray. He lunged for the phone, but I was faster. And Dr. Eris, I said, looking at the man in the chair. I hope your malpractice insurance is paid up. Because the patient you're trying to commit just sent a copy of your forged medical evaluations to the state board 10 minutes ago. The silence in the room was deafening. Then the front gate buzzed. Not the quiet buzz of a guest, but the heavy rhythmic sound of multiple vehicles. "That's not the retreat transport, Julian," I whispered. "That's the SSC. And they brought the police." But as the sirens grew louder, Julian didn't look at the door. He looked at Elara. And Elara. She was backing away toward the servants' entrance, a black bag in her hand I hadn't noticed before. "Julian," she hissed. "Tell me you didn't keep the hard drive in the safe." Julian's eyes widened. He realized too late that even his first love had a backup plan, and it didn't include him. The look on Julian's face wasn't just fear. It was the total collapse of an ego that had spent a decade believing it was untouchable. He looked at the front door where the sirens were getting louder, then at the side door where Elara was already halfway through the frame. "Elara," he barked, his voice cracking. "Where are you going? We had a deal." She didn't even turn around. The deal was for a billionaire, Julian, not a felon. She vanished into the servants' hallway, the heavy black bag swinging at her side. Julian tried to bolt after her, but I stepped in his path. I wasn't the fragile girl in the emerald dress anymore. I was the wall he couldn't climb over. "Move, Maya," he snarled, his hand reaching out to shove me aside. "The board is watching, Julian," I reminded him, pointing at the phone still streaming on the desk. "Every move you make is being recorded. You want to add assault to your list of charges." He froze. His chest was heaving. For the first time he looked at me, truly looked at me, and saw the person he'd spent 3 years trying to bury. The sirens stopped right outside. The front doors burst open. "Julian Vance. Federal agents. Stay where you are." I stepped back, watching as 3 agents in dark jackets swarmed the study. Dr. Eris was already in handcuffs, his face buried in his hands. Julian went limp. He didn't fight. He didn't argue. He just watched as they took his phone, his laptop, and finally his freedom. As they led him out, he stopped beside me. "Why?" he whispered. "I gave you everything. The clothes, the house, the life." "You gave me a cage, Julian," I said, my voice steady. "And you expected me to thank you for the bars. I didn't want the life of a ghost. I wanted my own." But as the police cars drove away, the adrenaline didn't fade. I looked toward the servants' entrance. Elara was gone, but she hadn't just taken the money. That black bag. It was too heavy for just cash. I ran to the wall safe behind the portrait of Julian's father. It was hanging open. He hadn't just kept his money in there. He kept the Vance protocols, the proprietary code that ran half the logistics networks in the country. If Elara got that code to the black market, she wouldn't just be rich, she'd be a national security threat. And Julian would be the one blamed for the leak. I grabbed my car keys. I knew exactly where she was going. There was only one private airfield in the city she'd have access to. The rain was a solid wall of water as I pushed my SUV to the limit. My hands were white knuckles on the steering wheel. I wasn't doing this for Julian. I was doing this because if Elara escaped with that code, my father's name, the name Julian had used to legitimize his company, would be dragged through the mud for the next 20 years. I pulled into the Northside airfield just as a small private jet began taxied toward the runway. I didn't think. I drove through the chain-link gate, the metal screaming as it tore away, and accelerated across the tarmac. I swerved in front of the jet's nose, slamming on the brakes. The jet lurched to a halt. The stairs lowered, and Elara stepped out, the wind whipping her hair across her face. She looked furious. She looked like a cornered animal. "You really are a glutton for punishment, aren't you, Maya?" she shouted over the roar of the engines. "He's gone. You won. Go home and enjoy your settlement." "I don't care about the settlement, Elara," I said, stepping out of the car. The rain soaked me instantly, but I didn't feel the cold. "Give me the bag. The protocols stay here." She laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. "You think Julian developed this code? He stole it from Weston 10 years ago. I'm just taking back what belongs to the highest bidder." Now get out of the way before I have the pilot run you over. Weston is waiting at the gate, Elara, I lied. I needed her to hesitate. He's already alerted the FAA. You're not taking off. She hesitated, just for a second. Her eyes flickered toward the gate. That was all I needed. Lunged. We went down on the wet tarmac, a tangle of limbs and wet silk. She was stronger than she looked, but I was fueled by 3 years of suppressed rage. I grabbed the strap of the bag, twisting it around my arm. Let go, she screamed, clawing at my face. I felt a sharp sting near my eye, but I didn't let go. I planted my foot and shoved, sending her sliding across the slick ground. I scrambled back into my car with the bag just as the airfield security lights flooded the runway. Elara stood up, looking at the approaching sirens. She looked at the jet, then at me. Without a word, she turned and ran into the darkness of the surrounding woods. She was a ghost again. I sat in the driver's seat, clutching the black bag to my chest. My heart was thudding so hard I thought it might burst. I opened the bag. It wasn't just the code. Inside were folders of documents Julian had kept as insurance. Documents detailing every bribe, every dirty deal, and every person he'd stepped on. But there was one more thing. Small velvet box. Opened it. Inside was a ring. Not the grandmother's ring he'd given me. It was a simple silver band with an inscription inside. To M, the only choice I ever made for myself. It was dated 3 years ago. The day we got married. The air left my lungs. He hadn't just been using me. At some point, the substitute had become real to him, and he was so terrified of that vulnerability that he tried to destroy me before I could change him. The next few months were a blur of depositions, courtrooms, and headlines. The Vance scandal was the lead story on every news outlet. Julian was sentenced to 12 years for corporate espionage and fraud. Dr. Eris lost his license and fled the country. Elara. She was never found. Some say she made it to Europe. Others say she's still hiding in plain sight, waiting for her next mark. I moved out of the mansion. I didn't take a single piece of furniture. I left the emerald dresses in the closet. I left the mahogany table where I'd sat in silence for 1,000 nights. I sat in a small 1-bedroom apartment overlooking the park. It was modest. It was quiet. It was mine. Weston Blake came by once a week. He'd reclaimed his company, but he wasn't the same man. He'd seen the rot at the heart of the industry, and it had changed him. The board wants to offer you a seat, Maya, he said, sitting on my small sofa. Your father's reputation was cleared. You're the hero of the story. I don't want a seat, Weston, I said, looking at the silver ring sitting on my windowsill. I hadn't worn it. I just kept it as a reminder. I want to do something that matters. Not just moving numbers around a screen. Julian sent another letter, Weston said, his voice softening. He wants to see you. He says he has something else to tell you. Something about why he really brought Elara back. I looked at the letter on the table. It was the 10th one this month. I'd burned the first 9. He's a manipulator, Weston, I said. He's trying to get me to testify for his appeal. Maybe, Weston replied. Or maybe he's finally realized that the ghost he was chasing wasn't Elara. It was the person he used to be before he traded his soul for an empire. I spent the night staring at that letter. My life was finally my own, but there was a knot in the center of it that wouldn't untie. I needed to know the truth. Was I a substitute, or was I the one who actually broke through his armor? And did it even matter now? I decided to go. Not for him. For the girl I used to be. The one who deserved to hear the truth, even if it came from a monster. The visiting room at the correctional facility smelled like floor wax and despair. I sat behind the glass waiting. When Julian walked in, I almost didn't recognize him. The expensive suits were gone, replaced by a drab orange jumpsuit. His hair was graying at the temples. He looked old. He looked human. He picked up the phone. I did the same. You came, he said. His voice was raspy, stripped of its usual silk. I'm here for the truth, Julian. No games. No transition plans. Why did you bring her back? He looked down at his hands. I was losing control, Maya. The company was failing. The board was closing in. I thought if I could bring Elara back, if I could recreate the glory days when I felt invincible, I could fix everything. And the commitment papers. The plan to ruin me. I couldn't have you seeing me fail, he whispered, his eyes finally meeting mine. They were wet. You looked at me with so much belief. Every time I saw that look, I felt like a fraud. I thought if I pushed you away, if I made you the crazy one, I wouldn't have to face the fact that I was the one who was broken. You almost destroyed my life because you were insecure. I felt a laugh bubble up in my throat. It was bitter and cold. 3 years of my life, Julian. I gave you everything. I know, he said. And the irony is, Elara didn't give a damn about me. She was gone the second things got hard. But you were the only thing in my life that was actually real. That ring in the safe. I bought that the night I realized I didn't want Elara back. I wanted the woman who was actually sitting across from me. But I didn't know how to be that man. He pressed his hand against the glass. I don't want an appeal, Maya. I deserve to be here. I just wanted you to know. You weren't the substitute. You were the only choice I ever got right. I looked at his hand against the glass. For 3 years I had craved those words. I had lived for the hope that I was enough. But as I looked at him, I realized I didn't need his validation anymore. The knot in my chest finally loosened. Thank you for saying that, Julian, I said, standing up. But it doesn't change anything. You're exactly where you belong. And I'm exactly where I should be. Maya, wait. Hung up the phone. I didn't look back as I walked through the heavy metal doors. The sun was shining outside. I took a deep breath of the cold, fresh air. The story of Julian and Maya was over. But my story was just beginning. Walking away from that prison glass felt like shedding a skin that had been too tight for years. I didn't cry. I didn't even look at the rearview mirror as I drove away from the facility. Julian was a chapter one had finally finished reading, and honestly, the ending was pathetic. I went back to my apartment and took that silver ring, the one Julian claimed represented his real feelings, and I didn't throw it away. I didn't melt it down. I walked to a small local jeweler, a woman who worked with her hands and smelled like silver polish and hard work. Can you turn this into something else? I asked, laying it on the counter. She looked at the inscription. To M, the only choice I ever made for myself. She looked at me, her eyes knowing. What do you want it to be? A key, I said. A charm for a necklace. Something that opens doors, not something that binds fingers. While she worked, I started my own work. I didn't use the Vance name. I went back to my maiden name, Maya Thorne. I used the small portion of the settlement I'd kept, the blood money, as I called it, and I opened a small consultancy. But it wasn't for tech moguls. It was for the people those moguls stepped on. I called it the Proxy Project. The goal was simple: provide legal, financial, and emotional shielding for spouses and partners who were being phased out by powerful people using moral turpitude, clauses, or fake mental health narratives. I knew the playbook because I had lived through every page of it. Within a month, my inbox was flooded. It turns out there are thousands of substitutes out there. Women and men who are being told they are crazy, redundant, or replaceable just because their partner found a newer model or a ghost from the past. I sat in my office, a bright, airy space filled with plants that I actually remembered to water, and looked at my first client. Her name was Ava. She was shaking, clutching a divorce petition that looked exactly like the one Julian had drafted for me. He says I'm not the woman he married, Ava whispered, her eyes red. He says he found his soulmate from college and that I was just a placeholder while he built his career. I reached across the desk and took her hand. My grip was firm. Ava, look at me. He's not telling you the truth about you. He's telling you a lie about himself to justify his own guilt. You aren't a placeholder. You're the foundation he built his life on, and now he's trying to steal the bricks. As I spoke, I felt a surge of something I hadn't felt in years. Purpose. Real raw purpose. I wasn't fighting Julian anymore. I was fighting the idea that anyone can be treated like a disposable part. 6 months later I was back in a courtroom. But this time I wasn't a witness for Julian's appeal. I was an expert witness in a landmark case against one of the city's largest law firms, the one that had helped Julian draft Clause 14b. The lead attorney, a man who looked like a more expensive version of Julian, tried to smirk at me from across the aisle. "Mrs. Vance, excuse me, Miss Thorne. Isn't it true that your own history with mental instability makes your testimony biased?" I didn't flinch. I didn't look at the cameras. I looked at the judge. "My instability, as you call it, was a manufactured narrative designed to strip me of my agency," I said, my voice ringing out clear and cold. "The documents I recovered from Julian Vance's safe prove that your firm provided the template for that gaslighting. You didn't just practice law. You practiced emotional liquidation." The room went silent. I laid out the evidence. The emails, the forged medical reports from Dr. Eris, the secret bank transfers. One by one, I dismantled the machine that had tried to crush me. When the judge handed down the ruling, a multi-million-dollar fine and a formal investigation into the firm's ethics, the substitutes sitting in the gallery stood up. There were dozens of them. People I had helped, people who had found their voices through mine. I walked out of the courthouse steps into a swarm of reporters. "Maya, are you doing this for revenge?" one shouted. "Stop." I looked directly into the camera lens. "Revenge is for people who are still stuck in the past," I said. "I'm doing this for justice. Because no one should ever have to prove they exist in their own marriage." As I walked away, I saw a familiar figure leaning against a car. It was Weston Blake. He held out a newspaper. The headline read, "Vance Tech Files for Bankruptcy." "The board tried to save it," Weston said. "But without the heart, it was just a hollow shell. Julian's legacy is officially gone." "Good," I said. "Let the ghosts have it." "So, what's next for the woman who took down a titan?" I looked at the key charm hanging around my neck, the one made from Julian's choice. I felt the weight of it, solid and real. "I think I'm going to go for a walk in the rain," I said, smiling. "And for the first time in my life, I'm not going to care what my hair looks like. So here I am. The mansion is gone. The emerald dresses are long gone. My hair has grown out into a style that belongs only to me. Julian is a name I see in legal updates, but he's no longer a name that carries any weight in my heart. I've learned something through all this pain, something I wish I could scream from the rooftops to everyone who has ever felt second best. We spend so much of our lives trying to be the perfect substitute for someone else's idea of happiness. We change our clothes, we change our voices, we even change our dreams just to fit into a space that was never meant for us. We think that if we just try hard enough, they'll finally see us. They'll finally choose us. But the truth is, you can't be a substitute for someone who isn't looking for a person. Julian wasn't looking for Elara, and he wasn't looking for me. He was looking for a mirror to reflect his own ego. When you stop being a mirror for someone else, they lose their reflection. And that's when they try to break the glass. But look at me now. I was broken. I was shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces. And you know what happens when you break glass? It becomes sharp. It becomes something that can cut through the lies. I'm not a first love. I'm not a second wife. I am Maya Thorne. I am the architect of my own life, and the foundation I've built is stronger than any empire Julian ever dreamed of. Justice isn't always a gavel in a courtroom. Sometimes, justice is just waking up in a room that belongs to you, drinking coffee that tastes exactly the way you like it, and realizing that the only person you ever needed to be enough for was yourself. If you're sitting in the dark right now, feeling like a ghost in your own home, hear me. You are not a placeholder. You are the main event. And the moment you decide to stop playing the supporting role in someone else's drama is the moment your real life begins. You are the only you there will ever be. And that is your greatest power. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you've lived through something similar, share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.